Welcome to another episode of A Cuppa with a Conversationalist. My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist. And yes, I have my cajoling latte in hand. My guest this morning is Mike Gregga, all the way from Montana, USA. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, awesome. It's afternoon for you, I'm guessing, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it's getting close on dinner time, actually.
Oh, goodness me. All right, we better make this quick.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All good. Mike Gregga has been conducting training of all kinds for over 20 years, and half of that time was spent training intelligence analysts for the US military. Mike has extensive experience with accredited courses, certifications, and formal curriculum development models. And in September of 2021, Mike decided to leave his six-figure career in the government, move to Montana, and double down on his own course creation business. Mike's superpower is creating completable course and coachable content at the speed of simplicity. I like the sounds of that, Mike. Mike is passionate about making course content simple, clear, and efficient. This is why he can create course content for his clients in just one single VIP day. Mike's courses are based on solving one specific problem, organized by tasks, and designed to generate demand for high-ticket offers, such as coaching or done-for-you services. Mike calls it strategic course creation. That's quite a resume right there, Mike. Quite a resume.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mike, I guess my first question is, how does one end up working as a trainer with analysts in the US military? And I think you mentioned before we started recording the US Marines. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I actually, in 1999, I joined the Marine Corps. Yeah. That's right. I joined the Marine Corps, and the job that they gave me was intelligence analysis. I actually went to the recruiter and said, I'm interested in intelligence. And they said, okay, but you better score real well on the ASVAB test, which is like the kind of like the equivalent of a high school GED kind of test. Yeah. Just kind of test to see, how much you know or whatever. And so I guess I did well enough. I guess I passed. And they let me join the Marine Corps as an intelligence analyst. So I got that intelligence training from the Marine Corps, did a couple of deployments, saw all over the Europe, and ended up going to Iraq and Kosovo and all kinds of very interesting places. So yeah, so then a few years later, when I was looking for a career, intelligence analysis training was something that I just kind of fell upon, because my old gunny that I used to work for was running the intelligence training program at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, affectionately known as Camp Swampy for those that live in the area. And because it's a very low elevation, very swampy place. But anyway, so I started doing intelligence training there, and that kicked off about a decade plus career doing intelligence analysis training for the Marine Corps. And so got into some other areas in the DC area too. And just a real interesting area to do, for a career. It's just fascinating. So
I'm curious, and I'm sure our audience is as well. What sort of training do you do for an analyst?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that you really want to focus on when you're training intelligence analysts, because when it comes to just about anything, people are very susceptible to believing kind of what they already have convinced themselves is true, right? So you kind of, as you look at the evidence, you tend to be biased toward your own theory that you've kind of already come up with, right? So one of the things that you really want to focus on for intelligence analysts is clear, simple thinking, logic, critical thinking, understanding biases and how they work, understanding logical fallacies. There's different analytic techniques called structured analytic techniques that are designed to take the thought process out of your head and get it down on paper into a systematic step-by-step process that kind of takes away the opportunity for bias to be introduced, because it enables multiple people to be looking at the same kind of process, and that helps really get rid of those biases. So lots of those kinds of things are kind of the fundamental basics that you learn as an intelligence analyst. But then you take those basics and apply them to different scenarios. So one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing, aside from training all those basics, was thinking about different scenarios that people could, that were supposed to mimic like a real wartime situation where the students would be thrown into this situation and asked to solve a problem together, work together, figure out the best way forward. And then, you know, as the instructors, we would give them critique and feedback and that sort of thing. So real interesting work.
I can imagine. Pardon me. What you're training these analysts, and you know, this critical thinking, and we always say, you know, we're wired for bias as human beings. We're wired for it. Now, at what point do you determine what makes a good analyst and what makes an analyst that is in training that isn't quite going to make the cut? Are there any clear defining guidelines that you go, nah, you're not going to make this?
Well, the way it works in the Marine Corps anyway, is when you first come in as an intelligence analyst, you go through a very lengthy program of training. Now, this was not my area, but it was a training program that I myself went through. It's definitely possible to flunk out. So there are graded tests and exams and things. And if you don't pass them, you get, oftentimes they'll recycle you to the previous class and you get to try again. But then sometimes there's some students where they say, brother, this just ain't your thing. and you know, I remember when I was going through intelligence analysis training for the first time, kind of the running joke was that you'd get recycled to motor T. Motor T refers to motor transport, and basically you'd learn to drive a truck. And that's what you would do in the Marine Corps for the rest of your time, is just drive the truck. And if you were lucky, maybe you'd learn to work on it, but that was about it. So yeah, there was a lot of incentive to make sure you did well. So
it's a big step. You're going from a potential Marines analyst to motor T.
Right.
and there ain't a lot in between.
Yeah, we used to sing songs when we were running about it. Motor T, the life for me.
Dear me.
That was really funny.
Mike, you mentioned in the information that you sent me that after 20 odd years working in the Marines as a training the analysts, you made the decision to leave and double down on your business, what you do.
That's right.
Was there a key, I guess, a one event, or was it an accumulation of events that brought that on?
Yeah, you know, when I started working as a training intelligence analyst, it was as a contractor. Now, when you work for the government, there's really two main ways that you can work for the government. One is as a government employee, and you hear about the shutdowns and all the things, and everybody, and during a government shutdown, there's a lot of sympathy for the government employees who are, you know, staying home and they're not working, and everybody's really concerned. What they don't tell you on the news is that the government employees, after they've been sitting at home for several weeks doing nothing, they actually get all their back pay for that when all is said and done. But then there's the other way of working for the government, which is as a contractor. And that's what I did. Contractors, when there's a shutdown, they just don't get paid and they never get the back pay. Contractors tend to make a little bit more money. They work for a private contracting company. The downside is while the benefits aren't as good. So it's kind of like anyway, the downside of it though is ultimately you can get laid off with really no notice. And generally what happens is Friday afternoon, they say, well, guess what? You're all laid off, all 10 of you or whatever on a team. You're all laid off. Don't come back to work on Monday. That happened to me in about the 10 years that I did it. That happened to me no less than 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that was just sort of always like kind of looming. You never really knew if that was coming or not. Of course, the boss would always say it wasn't. but you never really knew if it was, because it would come out of the blue. And the reason why it comes out of the blue, and I get it, the reason why, if they gave you a couple of months notice, everybody would quit.
Of course.
And then that's decreased revenue for the contracting company, you see, because the contracting company literally gets paid by the hour that they're filling the seat. It's just exactly the way a temp agency works.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it's exactly the same way. So
you've got over a period of time, then you've got, as you said, no less than 5 times. So you've got this constant specter of how long is this going to last, and when is the that tap on the shoulder. And so and so that's enough motivation, I guess.
It really is. I mean, the question becomes, when you're in a situation like that and you're constantly worried about getting laid off, how do you, as an employee, how do you cope with that? The way that I coped with it was and maybe this is just kind of my personality, the way that I dealt with it was I really strove every single day to prove that I was the last guy on the team that they needed to cut. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when cuts come, it would be, okay, get rid of half the team. I always wanted to make the cut. So literally day in and day out, it was just a constant, like, trying to prove myself, prove my worth. And it's very anxiety producing to do that. Now,
I was going to say,
doing your best work is not anxiety producing, but doing it, having to prove yourself every day, that's where it can become really, really challenging. And after a while, I was just like, you know what?
Enough.
One of the things that really kind of opened my eyes to the online world was the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
Because I worked for DOD at the time when that hit, and they sent everybody home, right? And we all started working from home, and they told us, and now I had only done in-person training at that point, but what they told us at the time, they were like, you know what, we've got to get some kind of online training. And of course, then we have to, okay, well, it's got to be unclassified, right? Because everybody's at home. So that was a challenge. But one of the things that I did early on in the lockdown was come up with some training very quickly that I could provide in an unclassified environment. And it was a massive success, just a huge success. In about a period of a year, I taught over 700 students.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great year. It was amazing. We reached way more people. And then it just sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities of the whole online world. And I was like, why am I doing this for somebody else with all this anxiety when I could get paid so much more and do such a better job?
Yeah.
So
the absolutely no doubt, our friend COVID has definitely changed the training dynamic globally, and it's forced so many people, albeit they've come along kicking and screaming, but it's forced them to review what they do and how they do it. Mike, what I want to ask you is, with your training with the US military, obviously there would have been a lot of aspects of that training. What particular skill or skills did you learn during your time in the US military that has had the most profound impact on how you train or what you do now?
Oh, that's such a great question, because honestly, my time training intelligence analysts has really been, I think, foundational for what I'm doing now. As you mentioned in the introduction, one of the things that I do now, my bread and butter offer right now, is a course creation VIP day, where I create somebody's course content along with them in a single VIP day, 6-hour block of time. Now, a lot of people will tell you, you ask them, how much time did you take creating your course? And they'll tell you 6 months, a year, crazy amounts of time, which, coming from the government and stuff like that, like, it's understandable. Curriculum development is a slow process. I've managed to figure out a way to do it in a day. How? By all that clear thinking, critical thinking, and logic that I learned and taught to intelligence analysts. It's all based on a very simple Very simple. It's got to be super simple. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming to the students. But I've come up with a very simple method of building out that content. And all that time I spent learning structured analysis, literally teaching logic to people, how arguments work, how human reasoning works, biases, fallacies, all those things now come into play. Because when I talk to people, people come to me and they've got all these chaotic ideas competing in their mind for attention. And they come to me and they're like, Mike, I've got all these ideas. I don't even know where to begin. I'm overwhelmed. And I just ask them a few simple questions. And because of all that training in logic and critical thinking that I have, I'm able to cut right to the heart of the matter and boil things down to its essence very quickly, very efficiently. And it's mind blowing to people, and their reaction to it is just amazing. And so, yeah, I really, really credit my time with the intelligence community and the military with really giving me those skills to be able to do that.
Mike, I'm curious, the training and the programs, or the training that you do to help people develop their programs. I know we spoke about online, and that's where I guess the focus has been. Does that help them in creating live content, or is that transferable, or is that part of your program as well? Or is it really just focused on online training?
So one of the things that I tell all of my clients is, look, let's build your content, right? The stuff that's going to go on the slides that they'll use for their presentation, right? Let's build that content. And then I'm going to ask you to do it live a couple of times. Now, some of my clients, they're like, no, you know what? I don't want to do it live. That's not for me. Okay, fine, whatever. But my recommendation is do it live 3 to 5 times and record it each time. And that time when you really knock it out of the park and you have a great hair day and everybody's smiling and everything works just well, use that recording, right? Use that recording for your evergreen, perpetually available on-demand pre-recorded course, right? Job that I was at, as I told you, during the lockdown from COVID, I taught over 700 students. There was one course that I taught over 70 times in less than a year. Wow. So multiple times per week, I'm giving this live training, like 2.5 hour course. Well, I could tell you, and believe me, I was very excited about the material, excited about the topic, passionate about it, really interested in it. It was a fun class to teach. The first 10 to 15 times, I enjoyed it. But as we got into time about 20 or so, I was like, oh man, do I have to do this again? By the time I hit 50, I was like, okay, I need to start looking for another job. This is killing me. So one of the things that I say is like, look, do it live a couple of times, work the bugs out, learn to anticipate the questions before they're asked, figure out the way that people are receiving this material, boost your confidence in that material so that your delivery is better, optimize it. It doesn't take long, 3 times, maybe maximum 5, maybe one more time. I don't know, but right around there, you're going to be optimized. And from then on, it won't change. So just record it and make it available. But you do need to do it a couple of times live to really optimize it, because, I really consider myself an expert on clarity of presentation. But even I don't trust myself on my first draft, right? Like the best authors in the world, J.K. Rowling, Stephen King. These people don't publish their first draft.
No.
Ever, right? Like Stephen King, he's even gone back and rewritten some of his original first couple of books that at the time were New York Times bestsellers, because in time he's learned, right? So the point is, the best course content in the world still needs to be delivered live, and it's still going to be able to be improved.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call.
That's,
Good call.
like I say, that's just an optimization kind of thing.
Sure. Good call. The course creation business, let's say, people are coming to you and Mike, I need help. And you mentioned it earlier, to develop a program or a course in the military, it's 6 months.
Oh,
and
yeah,
you're
at
helping
least.
people create it or more. Yeah. And you're helping people create their programs in 1 6-hour session.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. The first one's really, really simple. Is this a one-on-one service or is this a group training? That's the first question.
Oh, that's a great question. So my VIP day is a one-on-one service,
Right.
but I
Okay.
actually just launched a workshop where I'm teaching my process in a
Okay.
group setting.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So that clarifies that one. The next one is people are coming to you and, they've been battling, these 2 conversations because,
Yeah.
and what are some of the biggest challenges, or maybe 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges that you see, or roadblocks for these people in creating their course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest challenges is just being overwhelmed at the process as a whole, because, we kind of intuitively think, like, if you ask somebody what's a great way to go about a course, they'll intuitively kind of just take all of their expertise on a topic and do a massive brain dump, right, of everything they know on that topic.
Have you been bugging my phone?
And by the time they're done, this course is this monstrosity. It's like over 80 modules. It's hundreds of hours of recorded video. And, the students, they open this up and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. And so a lot of times this is kind of like our idea of a course is something like that. And when people contemplate building something of that size and scope, it's just this overwhelming concept, right? And at the same time, like, where do you even begin, right? Because they think, well, I know so much. I've developed all this expertise over, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. How do I convey this to people? And, how do I talk to people who don't know anything about it? How do I explain all this, magical wisdom that I possess to people who don't know anything about the topic, right? And so there's lots of different ways that people can become overwhelmed. And so starting, getting past that overwhelmed, that's the biggest challenge, I think, for most people. But then if they do get started, then the next biggest obstacle is just finishing the darn thing, right? Because they've got this idea, because, you hear the marketers online, they're saying, you've got to over deliver, right? You've got to provide so much value that people would be crazy not to listen. When it comes to course content, less is more, for sure. Because what happens when the students open up that course that's, so massive and overwhelming, you know what they do? They put it in the not right now category. I'll get to it later, they say. Well, later never comes. So the truth is, most people believe more content is more value. The truth is, less content is more value, because they're more likely to actually engage with it. The standard course completion rate for the entire online industry of courses is 5%. That means the typical online course, only 5% of the people who buy it actually complete it.
Goodness
now,
gracious,
to me, as an instructor, that's just absolutely horrifying. That means 95% of the people who raised their hand and said, yes, I want this course, and even opened their wallet and shelled out for it, didn't engage with it, didn't finish it. Now, some people, when I say that, they'll say, well, but I got what I wanted out of it. I went to the course and I picked these 2 or 3 modules. But again, still to me, that just signals that the course is not put together properly. It's just this, like I said earlier, an unorganized brain dump. That students are kind of cherry picking on their own. This is no longer somebody being guided by an expert. This is somebody guiding themselves, cherry picking, pulling things out of context. And this, this is not the right way to do it.
Yeah. Mike, there's obviously so many industries at the moment, and I'll look at the coaching genre as a whole at the moment. We've got life coaches, we've got financial coaches, we've got business coaches. The coaching industry seems to be one of the biggest and fastest growing industries we've ever seen, and only getting bigger with an enormous amount of professed experts. That said, there are certain things that my biased opinion that can't be taught as well in an online setting as opposed to in person. And I just want to use an example of me here, and free coaching. I teach people how to speak in public. That's one of the things that I do. And things like body language is just such a vital part of what we do. And being able to demonstrate that in a live setting, to be able to instruct and provide feedback to the participants of the programs is vital, absolutely vital. Is your course creation program, does that encompass, or does that solve that problem, or help in solving that problem?
What a great question. So this is where the strategic course creation comes into play. When I work with somebody to create a lower ticket course, the goal is for it to be always as a complement to a higher ticket offer, either done for you services or a coaching program. Because look, here's the truth. The truth is, a course, I don't care how good it is, how big it is, how complex or comprehensive it is, a course cannot convey mastery, ever. Mastery takes practice. The sort of standard thought is to be a true master of any art, any craft, it takes 10,000 hours of practice, right? That's a very famous, common way of living. A course can't do that for you. A course can only ever introduce. Now, don't get me wrong. Courses are completely indispensable as a way to introduce something, right? Introduce a process, introduce a concept, introduce a way of looking at things or a way of understanding the world. But that's all they do. Now, a lot of people, where they go wrong, and this is why we tend to want to throw everything we know into a course, where they go wrong is not really understanding the limited utility of a course. It's a very valuable thing, but it's limited. But this is why I always want it to be a complement specifically to, in a perfect world, to a coaching program. If you really want people to learn and grow and be able to do it, you've not only got to introduce them to it, but you got to hold their hand as they implement and be there to coach them and encourage them and pick them up when they fall and help correct them when they're going off in the wrong direction, right? And that's what a coaching program does. A course can't do that. No. Unless it's really a coaching program by another name, right?
I guess the confusion for me then is I understand your concept about the program, the online course needs to be a lead up to, the coaching program or whatever. If you're looking to obtain a global audience, which is the whole purpose of online, so to speak, how do you still translate that training of a practical exercise, albeit in a coaching environment, online? That's the part that I can't get my head around, other than doing, a Zoom call.
Yep.
And I'm standing here in front of the camera and I'm going, well, that's how you hold your hands, and don't do that. And, don't do this. Is that, or clearly I'm missing something here, because you've got a smile on your face.
No, you're not missing anything. I mean, look, here's the bottom line. You're absolutely right. In-person communication is infinitely more effective than any other means of communication, because body language and things like that. You may have noticed, because you can see me, I know your listeners on the podcast can't, but you may have noticed that I'm using a lot of hand gestures.
Absolutely.
I'm leaning in, I'm leaning back, I'm doing all those things, right? In a Zoom call, you can kind of capture some of that stuff, but you have to be very deliberate about doing it.
Yeah.
You have to be deliberate about your facial expressions. You have to be deliberate about your hand gestures. You have to think about these things, and you've got to do what you're doing on purpose.
Oh,
because you got to be communicating on purpose, right? And your goal is to be understood. And you've got all these tools at your disposal that you need to use to make sure that communication is occurring. And the bottom line is that in person, you simply have more tools at your disposal. That doesn't mean, though, that in a Zoom call you can't communicate effectively. It takes a little bit more work. You've got kind of, so to speak, one hand tied behind your back, but it's still possible.
Okay.
But I'm totally with you. The majority of my experience is in-person training, and there just is no substitute for that, just because of all the things you mentioned.
And for the listeners of the podcast, you will get the opportunity to see Mike in person here, because I will be posting the Zoom recording a few days after the actual podcast goes live. So they'll get to see your happy, smiling face all the way from Montana, Mike. Awesome. Mike, last question before I let you go. And I really want to thank you for your time and the absolute amazing value that you've provided to the listeners and potential viewers. We see, and you use the term in your introduction, certification and accreditation. I see it with this plethora of programs that are online now, which it's almost like it's a geometric progression. It's like, it quadruples hourly. And I'm seeing that the terms like certified, certification, accredited, they're almost like throwaway lines. It's like you can buy it, you can get it out of a cornflakes box. And so my question to you is, firstly, in your experience, when people are using terminology like that, what is the legitimacy of that claim?
Yeah.
And if you want to be certified or accredited, what is indeed the process, and who is the body that is doing this, the hand of God, so to speak, you are now the anointed one?
Yeah. So this is a great question. So let me start with accreditation. So when I worked for the Marine Corps specifically, one of the things that we did was we were training, most of our students were junior Marines who were on their first enlistment, and they were probably going to be working towards a college degree either after they get out or maybe while they're still in, using tuition reimbursement programs and things. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to get our courses accredited for college credit. And so we put our courses through accreditation with the American Council on Education, which is a governing body that was that's recognized by many public universities in the U.S. as a way of accrediting that. And so they basically said, they looked at our courses, the ones that we put through the program. We put, I think, 15 courses through it. And I had written 3 of them, if I remember correctly. And in each one of our courses, they looked at individually and determined how many hours of college credit those courses were going to be worth. And so we put our courses through that process. And really what they were doing is they were validating our course creation process. They were validating the curriculum fundamentals, like, did we have learning objectives? Did we have learning outcomes? Did we have a test? Did the test match up with the learning outcomes? Did the materials actually cover the learning outcomes? That sort of thing. So they were really testing our curriculum development process.
Okay.
And very much the same thing when I worked for a different DoD agency called DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. We got our 7-week-long indoctrination course accredited through a body that does accreditation for the intelligence community throughout the U.S. government. So we put it through that process, and it was really very much the same thing. The key in accreditation or in certification, and really this is the bottom line, the most important part, is whether or not there's a test of some kind. In most online courses that you go through, there's no test. You just watch the modules, learn, and good luck to you, right? In order to obtain a certification, now, I suppose I should say there's probably some certifications out there online that just, like, they call it a certification, but there's no test. But in order to have a legitimate certification, there needs to be a test. You need to be able to prove that you've mastered the material. And I use the word mastered with caution and the caveat that I said earlier that courses don't convey mastery. But the thing is that when you're certified, the certification should be a signal that you are able to complete certain tasks to a certain standard, right? If you've met that standard, then you get certified. You are certified as having met the standard or whatever, right? And so a lot of times, so if somebody came to me and said, I want to do a certification program, I'd say, okay, here's how you would go about it. You create your course, then you create two kinds of tests. Number one would be a written test, multiple choice, that would be comprehensive. Test them on everything that they learned. Number two would be some kind of project, some kind of presentation. So important, because for some of your listeners that may be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, the highest level of Bloom's, which is to say the highest level of learning, is the ability to create something new. So have them create a project, have them create a presentation where they actually have to present something based on what they've learned. And then you, as the instructor, will grade that presentation using a rubric, which is something that I can help my clients create. But they'll use a rubric that helps make the grading really, really fast, and at the same time, really, really clear and objective, right? So then if they've passed the written test, which can be graded automatically by a computer because it's multiple choice, right? Pass the written test, and then they meet the standard on the project, then you give them the certification. Now, every certification program, no matter how legitimate, starts off in the same place, out of nowhere, right? Just they started at square one, right? Where they don't really have a reputation, and over time, their certified students go on to have great results, and hopefully they're collecting the data, and then that can prove the legitimacy of the certification.
Fair enough. Good point. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you for the really amazing value and information you've provided to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't want to hold you up.
Pleasure's all mine. Absolutely.
You're a legend. I don't want to hold you up from your dinner any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest on today's program has been Mike Gregga, all the way from Montana, USA. My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist. And until next time, bye for now.